In the vast darkness of space, where empires rise and fall like distant stars, one moment of compassion between strangers would reshape the destiny of two worlds. When a dying alien vessel drifts through the void, its Imperial passenger barely clinging to life, a lone human freighter captain faces a choice that will echo across galaxies. He doesn't know she's the most powerful ruler in the Zephyrian Empire. She doesn't know he belongs to a species the galaxy believes extinct. Sometimes the greatest acts of heroism happen not in grand battles, but in quiet moments when we choose to save a life, even when that life belongs to someone we've never met, from a world we'll never see. But what happens when that single act of kindness becomes the catalyst for an interstellar revelation that could either unite two civilizations or tear them apart forever? This is the story of Marcus Chun, a cargo hauler with Earth soil still under his fingernails, and Empress Laurelii of Zephyros Prime, whose first meeting in the cold vacuum of space would become the stuff of legends. Neither knew that their encounter would challenge everything their peoples believed about strength, honor, and what it truly means to be human in a universe that had written humanity off as myth. The proximity alarm on the cargo freighter Wandering Star pierced through the steady hum of the life support systems, dragging Captain Marcus Chun from his meditation. He'd been floating in the observation deck, watching the stars whirl slowly past as his ship drifted through the outer reaches of the Kepler Nebula. 3 months of solitary cargo runs had taught him to appreciate these quiet moments between the chaos of inhabited systems. Marcus pushed himself off the reinforced viewport and glided toward the bridge, his weathered hands finding purchase on the familiar handholds worn smooth by years of use. At 42, he'd spent more time in space than most people spend in careers, and the zero-gravity environment felt as natural as walking had once felt on Earth's surface, back when Earth still existed. The bridge of the Wandering Star was cramped but efficient, designed for a single operator. Marcus slid into his captain's chair and pulled up the sensor display, his dark eyes scanning the readouts with practiced efficiency. The proximity sensors had detected a vessel approximately 15,000 kilometers off the starboard bow, drifting without power or propulsion. "Well, that's interesting," Marcus muttered, his voice carrying the faint accent of old California that marked him as one of the few survivors of the Sol system. He enhanced the sensor resolution and whistled softly. The ship was elegant, sleek, and definitely not human in design. Its hull curved in graceful arcs that suggested advanced engineering, with sections that seemed to shimmer even in the starlight. The vessel was roughly twice the size of his freighter, but something was clearly wrong. No energy signatures registered on his scanners except for minimal life support, and even that was fluctuating dangerously. As Marcus watched, one of the power readings dropped to critical levels. He ran a hand through his graying hair, considering his options. The smart play would be to log the coordinates and report the derelict to the nearest space authority. Getting involved with alien vessels rarely ended well for independent freight captains, especially ones carrying forged identification and operating under assumed names. But Marcus Chun had never been particularly good at making the smart play. He activated the communication array and broadcast on standard emergency frequencies. "Unknown vessel. This is Captain Marcus Chun of the cargo freighter Wandering Star. I'm reading critical power levels on your ship. Do you require assistance?" Static filled the bridge for several long moments. Marcus was about to repeat his transmission when a weak signal crackled through the speakers. The voice was distinctly feminine, with an accent he didn't recognize, speaking in accented standard galactic. "Freighter Captain, this is someone who desperately needs help. My ship's power core is failing. Life support will be gone within the hour. Can you take on passenger?" Marcus frowned at the phrasing. Not "this is the captain" or even a ship designation. Just someone who needed help. Either this person was very careful about revealing information, or they were too injured to think clearly. "I can take you aboard," Marcus replied. "Docking might be tricky if your ship's systems are down. Can you reach an airlock?" I think so. My leg is injured, but I can move." "Understood. I'm maneuvering to dock with your port airlock. Hold tight." Marcus fired the maneuvering thrusters and began the delicate process of bringing his ship alongside the alien vessel. As he drew closer, he could see the damage more clearly. Scorch marks across the hull suggested weapons fire, and one section near the engine compartment showed the telltale signs of an explosion. This hadn't been an accident. Someone had attacked this ship. The docking procedure took nearly 20 minutes. The alien vessel's airlock was designed for a different atmospheric standard, and Marcus had to adjust his ship's system to compensate. Finally, the docking collar sealed with a satisfying clunk, and the pressure equalized with a hiss. Marcus grabbed a medical kit from the emergency supplies and made his way to the airlock. He'd met dozens of alien species during his years in space, but he never quite knew what to expect. Some were roughly humanoid, others were so alien that communication required specialized equipment. The airlock cycled, and Marcus found himself face to face with one of the most striking beings he'd ever encountered. She was humanoid, roughly his height, with pale blue skin that seemed to shimmer with an inner light. Her hair was silver white, flowing past her shoulders in waves that moved as if underwater. Her eyes were the most startling feature, a deep violet that seemed to hold depths Marcus couldn't fathom. She wore clothing that appeared to be made of some kind of advanced material, form-fitting and practical, though torn and stained with what looked like blue blood. She was also clearly in pain. She leaned heavily against the airlock frame, favoring her left leg, and Marcus could see a nasty gash along her thigh where the fabric of her outfit had been torn away. "Thank you," she said, her voice stronger now that she wasn't speaking through damaged communication systems. "I wasn't certain anyone would answer my distress call in this sector. Not much traffic out here." Marcus agreed, stepping forward to offer support. "Let me help you to the medical bay. That leg looks like it needs attention." She hesitated for a moment, studying his face with those remarkable eyes. Marcus had the distinct impression she was evaluating him, measuring something he couldn't identify. Then she nodded and accepted his support. "My name is Lyra," she said as they made their slow way through the corridors of the Wandering Star. I'm grateful you stopped." "Marcus Chun," he replied, "and don't mention it. We're all just trying to get by out here in the dark." The medical bay was small but well-equipped. Marcus had learned long ago that when you operated alone in space, medical emergencies were often a matter of life and death. He helped Lyra onto the examination table and began cleaning the wound on her leg. "This is going to sting," he warned, applying antiseptic to the gash. Lyra hissed softly but didn't pull away. Marcus noticed that her pain tolerance was impressive. The wound was deep and clearly painful, but she endured his ministrations without complaint. "What happened to your ship?" Marcus asked as he worked. "Those scorch marks looked like weapons fire." Lyra was quiet for a long moment. "Pirates," she said finally. "They attacked without warning. I managed to escape in my personal vessel, but they damaged the power core during their assault." Marcus nodded, though something about her story felt incomplete. The ship he'd seen didn't look like a personal vessel. It looked like something designed for important passengers. And pirates usually didn't attack ships unless they expected valuable cargo. But everyone had secrets in space, and Marcus Chun had more than most. "Well, you're safe now," he said, applying a regenerative patch to her wound. "The patch will accelerate healing and prevent infection. You should be able to walk normally in a few days." "Thank you," Lyra said softly. "I don't know how to repay your kindness." Marcus waved dismissively. "No payment necessary. Where do you need to go?" "I'm headed toward the Centauri trade routes, but I can make a detour if necessary." Lyra considered this. "The trade routes will be fine. I can arrange transportation from there." Over the next few hours, Marcus helped Lyra settle into one of the small passenger cabins. The Wandering Star wasn't designed for passengers, but he'd converted one of the cargo bays into basic living quarters for situations like this. It wasn't luxurious, but it was clean and comfortable. As evening ship time approached, Marcus found himself cooking dinner for two, something he hadn't done in months. He'd grown accustomed to his solitary existence, but having another person aboard felt oddly natural. Lyra joined him in the small galley, moving carefully but clearly feeling better. She'd changed into clean clothes Marcus had provided, simple gray coveralls that looked oddly formal on her elegant frame. "Smells wonderful," she said, settling into the chair across from him. "Nothing fancy," Marcus replied, serving portions of his standard pasta dish onto 2 plates. "But it's filling and nutritious." They ate in comfortable silence for several minutes. Marcus found himself studying his passenger when she wasn't looking. There was something about her bearing that suggested nobility or high rank. The way she held herself, the careful precision of her movements, the way she observed everything around her with keen intelligence. "Where are you from, Marcus-chun?" Lyra asked suddenly. The question caught him off guard. Most travelers in space were careful not to ask too many personal questions. Everyone had reasons for being in the void between stars, and those reasons were often private. "Originally, a place called Earth," Marcus replied, "though that was a long time ago." Lyra's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "Earth? I've heard stories about Earth. They say it was destroyed decades ago." "The stories are true," Marcus said quietly. "Solar instability. The star went nova and took the whole system with it. Some of us managed to get out before it happened." "I'm sorry," Lyra said, and Marcus could hear genuine sympathy in her voice. "It must be difficult, being one of the few survivors of your world." Marcus shrugged, though the gesture felt forced. "You learn to adapt. Space becomes home after a while. Do you miss it? Earth?" The question hung in the air between them. Marcus set down his fork and stared at his plate, remembering green hills and blue skies, the smell of rain on summer afternoons, the sound of birds singing in trees that grew in soil instead of hydroponic gardens. "Every day," he said finally, "but missing something doesn't bring it back. You move forward, find new purposes, help where you can." Lyra nodded, and Marcus had the impression she understood something about loss herself. "What about you?" Marcus asked. "Where are you from?" "A world called Zephyros Prime," Lyra replied. "It's in the Andromeda sector, quite far from here." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "That is far. You're a long way from home." "Business," Lyra said simply. "I travel frequently for work." They finished dinner, and Marcus cleaned up while Lyra returned to her cabin to rest. As he worked, Marcus found himself thinking about his passenger. There was definitely more to her story than she was sharing, but that was her business. He'd learned long ago not to pry into other people's secrets. Later that evening, as Marcus made his rounds checking the ship's systems, he paused at the observation deck. Through the reinforced viewport, he could see Lyra's damaged ship drifting alongside his own. The emergency tethers held both vessels together as they moved through space like strange dance partners. Something bothered him about the attack she described. The damage pattern didn't look random. It looked targeted, designed to disable rather than destroy. And that ship was definitely not a personal transport. The whole design suggested advanced military technology, possibly government issue. Marcus sighed and continued his inspection. Whatever was going on, Lyra would tell him if, and when she felt comfortable doing so. Until then, he'd respect her privacy and get her safely to the trade routes. What Marcus didn't know was that in her cabin, Lyra was staring out her own small viewport at the stars, thinking about the kindness of the human who had saved her life. She'd heard stories about humans. Most of the galaxy believed them to be extinct, and those who knew otherwise often considered them primitive, barely civilized refugees from a dead world. But Marcus Chun had shown her compassion without expectation of reward, had cared for her injuries with gentle hands, and had opened his home to a complete stranger. There was nothing primitive about his kindness, nothing uncivilized about his generosity. For the first time in years, Empress Laurelii of the Zephyrian Empire found herself questioning what she thought she knew about humanity. And as she drifted off to sleep in the small cabin of a human cargo freighter, she began to wonder if perhaps the galaxy had been wrong about a great many things. 3 days into their journey toward the Centauri trade routes, Marcus discovered that his passenger was far more complex than he'd initially assumed. Lyra proved to be intelligent, well-educated, and surprisingly knowledgeable about interstellar politics and trade. Their conversations during meals had evolved from polite exchanges to genuinely engaging discussions about everything from stellar navigation to philosophy. On this particular morning, Marcus found her in the observation deck, floating gracefully near the large viewport as she watched the stars. She'd adapted to zero gravity with surprising ease, moving through the ship with the fluid motions of someone accustomed to space travel. "Couldn't sleep?" Marcus asked, joining her at the viewport. "I don't require as much rest as some species," Lyra replied, "and I find a view peaceful. On Zephyros Prime, our cities are so bright that you can barely see the stars at night." Marcus nodded, understanding the sentiment. Earth was like that too, in the big cities. But where I grew up, in the mountains of California, you could see the whole galaxy spread out above you on clear nights. My father used to tell me stories about the constellations. "What kind of stories?" Lyra asked, turning to face him with genuine interest. Marcus smiled, remembering. "Old myths, mostly. The Greeks saw hunters and warriors and beautiful women in the star patterns. My father would point out Orion, the great hunter, and tell me about his adventures. There was Andromeda, the princess chained to a rock, waiting to be rescued by Perseus." "We have similar stories on my world," Lyra said, "though our constellations tell tales of emperors and empresses, great leaders who shaped the destiny of our people." There was something in her voice when she said emperors and empresses that made Marcus glance at her curiously, but he didn't comment on it. "Tell me about Earth," Lyra continued. "What was it really like before the end?" Marcus was quiet for a moment, gathering his thoughts. "Beautiful. Diverse. We had massive oceans that stretched beyond the horizon, and continents covered in forests and grasslands and deserts. The weather was chaotic, I suppose, compared to most terraformed worlds. You never knew if it would be sunny or stormy from one day to the next." "That sounds wonderful," Lyra said softly. "Unpredictable weather. We control the climate on Zephyros Prime so carefully that every day is essentially identical. There were billions of us," Marcus continued, "packed into cities and scattered across rural areas. We were not a particularly unified species. Lots of different cultures, different languages, different ways of looking at the world. We spent a lot of time fighting among ourselves." "Most species do," Lyra observed. "Unity often comes only when faced with external threats." Marcus chuckled, though there wasn't much humor in it. "We had plenty of external threats. Climate change, resource depletion, the usual growing pains of species learning to live within its means. But we were stubborn. Humans have always been good at surviving impossible situations. How many of you escaped when the star became unstable?" The question hung between them like a weight. Marcus had answered this question before, but it never got easier. "Maybe 100,000, he said quietly. "Out of 8 billion. Most of the evacuation ships were destroyed when the nova's radiation hit them. A few made it to other systems, but—" He shrugged. "We're scattered now, spread thin across the galaxy. Most people assume we're extinct, and we don't usually correct them." "Why not?" Marcus considered how to explain it. "Being a refugee species isn't easy. You're always an outsider, always dependent on the charity of others. Some humans have managed to integrate into other civilizations, start new lives. But many of us, we just drift. We work cargo ships or mining stations or whatever jobs nobody else wants. It's easier to blend in when people don't know what you are." Lyra was quiet for several minutes, processing this information. Finally, she asked, "Do you regret surviving?" The question surprised Marcus with its directness. "No," he said after thinking about it. "I regret that so many didn't make it out. I regret that Earth is gone. But I don't regret being alive. There's still good to be done in the galaxy, still people who need help. Like picking up stranded passengers." "Like picking up stranded passengers," Marcus agreed with a smile. They spent the rest of the morning talking about their respective worlds. Marcus described Earth's diverse ecosystems and chaotic history, while Lyra painted a picture of Zephyros Prime as an orderly, prosperous world where technology and nature existed in careful balance. Her descriptions were detailed and affectionate, But Marcus noticed she spoke about her homeworld like someone who had studied it extensively rather than someone who had grown up there. Later that day, as they shared lunch in the galley, Lyra asked about human culture. What made humans distinctive as a species? What set you apart from other intelligent life? Marcus thought about it while chewing his sandwich. Adaptability, maybe, and stubbornness. Humans were remarkably good at surviving in environments that should have killed us. We lived everywhere on Earth, from frozen polar regions to scorching deserts to tropical rainforests. Most species evolve in one type of environment, but humans just adapted. And you're all so different from each other, Lyra observed. Your skin color, your features, even your body types vary significantly. Racial diversity, Marcus nodded. We evolved on different continents under different conditions. It led to a lot of conflict throughout our history, unfortunately. People fear what's different, even when those differences are superficial. But you overcame those conflicts? Eventually, mostly. It took a long time and a lot of growing up as a species. The threat of extinction has a way of making previous conflicts seem petty. Lyra studied his face as he spoke. You don't seem bitter about any of it. Bitterness is a luxury I can't afford, Marcus replied. It takes too much energy, and there's too much work to do. That afternoon, while Marcus was in the engine room performing routine maintenance, an alarm began blaring throughout the ship. He quickly made his way to the bridge, where the sensor display showed 3 ships approaching rapidly from astern. They were sleek, military-looking vessels with weapon signatures that made Marcus's blood run cold. Lyra, he called over the intercom. We've got company, and they don't look friendly. Lyra appeared on the bridge within seconds, moving with a speed and grace that surprised Marcus. Her face was grim as she studied the sensor readouts. Zephyr pursuit ships, she said quietly. Friend of yours? Marcus asked, already knowing the answer from her expression. Not exactly, Lyra replied. Marcus, I need to tell you something. I haven't been entirely honest about who I am. Before she could continue, the communication system crackled to life. A harsh voice, speaking accented Standard Galactic, filled the bridge. Human vessel, you are harboring a fugitive from Zephyrian justice. Prepare to be boarded, or we will open fire. Marcus looked at Lyra, raising an eyebrow. Fugitive? It's complicated, Lyra said. Marcus, I need you to trust me. Those ships will destroy your vessel without hesitation if they believe I'm aboard. Are you? Marcus asked calmly. Am I what? A fugitive from justice? Lyra met his eyes steadily. That depends entirely on your definition of justice. The pursuing ships were closing rapidly. Marcus had perhaps 5 minutes before they were in weapons range. His ship was fast for freighter, but it wasn't built for combat or evasion. Okay, Marcus said, settling into the pilot's chair. I don't know what you've done, and I don't know who you really are, but you're my passenger, and I don't hand over passengers to armed ships that threaten to blow me out of space. Marcus, you don't understand. I understand enough, he interrupted, beginning evasive maneuvers. Hold on. The Wandering Star wasn't built for high-speed pursuits, but Marcus had made several modifications over the years. He activated the enhanced engines he'd installed after a particularly unpleasant encounter with customs officials, and the ship leaped forward with surprising acceleration. The pursuing vessels responded immediately, increasing their own speed to match. Weapon signatures began charging on Marcus's sensors. They weren't bluffing about opening fire. There's an asteroid field about 10 minutes ahead, Marcus said, studying the navigation display. If I can reach it before they get a target lock, we might be able to lose them. Marcus, Lyra said urgently, you need to know, a weapons blast streaked past the viewport, close enough that the ship's shields flared with absorbed energy. The second shot struck them directly, and the Wandering Star shuddered under the impact. Tell me later, Marcus shouted over the alarm klaxons. Right now, I need to keep us alive. He threw the ship into a series of evasive rolls that would have been impossible in a larger vessel. The pursuing ships adjusted their course to compensate, but Marcus's smaller profile and irregular movements made them difficult targets. Another weapons blast struck the rear shields, and warning lights began flashing across the control panel. The shield generators were overloading. They couldn't take many more hits. There, Marcus pointed at the navigation display. The asteroid field. The wandering star plunged into the chaotic maze of tumbling rocks and debris, with Marcus flying by instinct and years of experience. He threaded the ship between massive asteroids, using their bulk to block targeting sensors while the pursuing vessels struggled to follow. One of the pursuit ships clipped an asteroid while trying to match Marcus's maneuvers. It spun out of control and crashed into a larger rock, exploding in a brilliant flash that lit up the asteroid field. The remaining two ships pulled back, unwilling to risk destruction in the dangerous maze of tumbling stone. They're holding position at the edge of the field, Marcus reported, checking his sensors. But they're not leaving. They'll wait, Lyra said grimly. They know we have to come out eventually. Marcus nodded, considering their options. The asteroid field provided temporary shelter, but it wasn't a permanent solution. His ship's supplies were limited, and the pursuing vessels could call for reinforcements. All right, he said, turning to face his passenger. I think it's time you told me who you really are and what this is all about. Lyra was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the tumbling asteroids surrounding them. When she finally spoke, her voice carried a weight Marcus hadn't heard before. My name is Lyrelii Zephyros, she said. I am the Empress of the Zephyrian Empire. Marcus blinked, certain he'd misheard. Come again. I'm the ruler of one of the largest and most powerful civilizations in the galaxy, Lyra continued. Those ships out there aren't pursuing a fugitive. They're pursuing me because there are factions within my own government who believe I've become a liability to the Empire. The bridge was silent except for the hum of life support systems. Marcus stared at his passenger, the woman he'd been sharing meals with, who'd helped him clean dishes, who'd slept in his spare cabin like any other traveler. You're an Empress, he said slowly. I am. And you didn't think to mention this when I pulled you out of a damaged ship? Would it have changed anything? Lyra asked. Would you have helped me any less if you'd known I was royalty? Or would you have demanded payment or tried to ransom me back to my government? Marcus considered this. Probably not. But it might have been nice to know that helping you could result in being hunted across the galaxy by military vessels. I'm sorry, Lyra said sincerely. I should have told you sooner. But I needed time to determine what kind of person you were, whether you could be trusted. And your conclusion? That you were exactly the kind of person I hoped you were when I heard your voice on the emergency channel, Lyra replied. Someone who helps because it's the right thing to do, not because there's profit in it. Marcus was quiet for several minutes, absorbing this information. An Empress. He'd rescued an Empress and was now hiding from her own military in an asteroid field. The irony wasn't lost on him. So what's the plan, Your Majesty? He asked finally. Just Lyra, please, she said. And I'm not sure. I was trying to reach the Galactic Council to present evidence of corruption within my government. There are factions that want to start a war with several neighboring civilizations, purely for territorial expansion. I've been trying to stop them. Let me guess, they decided you were standing in the way of their plans. Something like that. The attack on my ship was meant to look like an accident. If you hadn't found me. But I did, Marcus said simply. And now we figure out what to do next. Lyra looked at him with something approaching amazement. You're not going to turn me over to them? Not a chance, Marcus replied. I may just be a cargo hauler, but I know the difference between people trying to prevent a war and people trying to start one. For the first time since the pursuit ships had appeared, Lyra smiled. Thank you, Marcus. Don't thank me yet, Marcus said, studying the sensor readings. We're still trapped in here, and they're not going anywhere. We need a plan. As if in response to his words, the communication system activated. The same harsh voice from before filled the bridge. Human Captain, you have 1 hour to surrender the fugitive, or we will begin systematically destroying asteroids until we flush you out. There is no escape from this field. Marcus looked at Lyra, then at the threatening ships visible on his sensors. Well, he said, that's not good. Marcus Chun had faced impossible situations before, but Having an Empress aboard his ship while being hunted by military vessels in an asteroid field definitely ranked among the more challenging moments of his life. He floated in the pilot's chair, studying the sensor displays and tactical readouts, while Lyra watched the pursuing ships through the observation cameras. "Tell me about those ships," Marcus said. "Capabilities, weaknesses, crew size." "Zephyr interceptors," Lyra replied. "Fast, well-armed, designed for pursuit and capture missions. Each carries a crew of 12, with advanced targeting systems and military-grade shields. They're built to hunt down smugglers and pirates. And Empresses, apparently. Apparently. Marcus pulled up the detailed sensor data on the two remaining pursuit ships. They positioned themselves at opposite edges of the asteroid field, effectively creating a blockade. Any attempt to leave would put the wandering star in their crossfire. "They're not trying to destroy us," Marcus observed. "Those first shots were warning shots. They could have vaporized us if they'd wanted to." "They need me alive," Lyra explained. "Dead, I become a martyr and a symbol of resistance. Alive and in custody, I could be discredited, forced to recant my accusations, made to appear unstable or incompetent. Lovely friend you have." "They weren't always my enemies," Lyra said sadly. "Admiral Korath, who's commanding this operation, he was one of my father's most trusted advisors. I've known him since I was a child." Marcus studied the tactical display, his mind working through possibilities. "These interceptors, they're designed to fight smugglers and pirates, right? Not military vessels." "Correct." "Why?" "Because smugglers and pirates use predictable tactics. They run in straight lines, they hide behind obstacles, they try to outgun their pursuers with bigger weapons. They don't usually think outside the box." Lyra floated closer to the display. "What are you thinking?" Marcus called up a detailed scan of the asteroid field. The tumbling rocks ranged from pebbles to massive chunks of stone several kilometers across. The field itself was roughly spherical, with the pursuing ships positioned at what they considered strategic points. "Humans," Marcus said slowly, "have always been good at fighting asymmetric warfare. When you're outgunned and outnumbered, you don't fight fair. You fight smart." He highlighted several large asteroids on the display, showing their rotation patterns and trajectories. "These big rocks, they're not just obstacles. They're tools if you know how to use them." "I'm not following." Marcus grinned, and Lyra caught a glimpse of something dangerous in his expression. "Your admiral out there is thinking like a military commander. Control the exits, contain the enemy, force them to surrender through superior firepower. It's a solid strategy against conventional opponents, but not against humans. Humans don't fight conventionally when we're desperate," Marcus said. "We improvise. We adapt. We use our environment as a weapon." Marcus began plotting a course through the asteroid field, his fingers dancing over the navigation controls. "I'm going to need you to trust me completely for what comes next. And I'm going to need you to be ready to take the helm if something goes wrong." "Marcus, I can't pilot your ship." "You won't need to pilot it. Just keep us pointed in the right direction if I become incapacitated." Lyra didn't like the sound of that, but she nodded. "What's your plan?" "We're going to create a distraction," Marcus said, activating the ship's communication system. "And then we're going to do something those interceptors will never expect." He opened a channel to the pursuit ships. "Zephyrian vessels, this is Captain Chun. I'm willing to negotiate." The harsh voice of Admiral Korath crackled through the speakers. "There is nothing to negotiate, human. Surrender the fugitive, and you will be allowed to leave unharmed." "I appreciate the offer, Admiral, but I have a counter-proposal. I'll trade the Empress for safe passage and a substantial payment. Say 10 million credits." Lyra stared at Marcus in shock. He held up a hand, silently asking her to trust him. "You would betray your passenger for money?" Korath's voice carried disgust. "I'm a cargo hauler, Admiral. I move things from one place to another for profit. The Empress is just another cargo item, albeit a valuable one." "Very well. Transfer her to one of our ships, and you'll receive your payment." "Not so fast," Marcus said. "I want to see the credits transferred to my account first. Then, I'll bring her to your ship personally. Agreed. Transmit your account information. Marcus provided a dummy account number, then closed the communication channel. Lyra was looking at him with a mixture of hurt and confusion. Marcus, I need those ships to move closer together, Marcus explained quickly. Cora thinks he's about to get what he wants, so he'll consolidate his forces for the transfer. That gives me a narrow window to work with. Understanding dawned on Lyra's face. You're not actually planning to surrender me. Not a chance. But I need them to think I am. Marcus watched the tactical display as the two interceptors began moving toward each other, converging on a large asteroid roughly in the center of the field. They maintained their spacing, close enough to support each other, but far enough apart to avoid collision. Now comes the tricky part, Marcus muttered, activating the Wandering Star's engines. He piloted the ship through the asteroid field with surprising speed, weaving between the tumbling rocks as if he'd been flying through them all his life. The interceptors tracked his movement, weapon systems powered, but not targeting. They still believed he was coming to surrender. There, Marcus said, pointing to a massive asteroid approximately 1 kilometer in diameter. It was rotating slowly, its surface scarred by countless impacts. That's our key. I don't understand. That asteroid is mostly iron and nickel, very dense, very massive. It's also rotating at approximately 1 revolution every 6 hours. If I could position us correctly, Marcus brought the Wandering Star alongside the massive rock, matching its rotation speed. The ship's hull scraped against the asteroid's surface as he maneuvered into position. Marcus, what are you doing? Something that's either brilliant or completely insane, Marcus replied, activating the ship's magnetic grappling clamps. The clamps locked onto the metallic asteroid with a satisfying thunk. Now the Wandering Star was essentially attached to the massive, rotating rock. As the asteroid spun, it carried the ship with it, building angular momentum. Emergency message to the interceptors, Marcus said, opening the communication channel again. Admiral, we've had a mechanical failure. My navigation system is down, and we're stuck against this asteroid. I need 15 minutes to make repairs before I can complete the transfer. Understood, Korath replied. We'll maintain position. Marcus closed the channel and began calculating trajectories on the navigation computer. Lyra, I need you to monitor the asteroid's rotation speed and the interceptor's positions. When I give the word, I'm going to release the grappling clamps. And then what happens? Then we find out if humans are as crazy as the rest of the galaxy thinks we are. For 12 minutes, the Wandering Star rode the rotating asteroid like a stone in a sling, building angular momentum with each revolution. The interceptors maintained their positions, waiting patiently for the repairs to be completed. Marcus watched the tactical display intently, calculating angles and velocities. Almost there, he murmured. Just a few more degrees. Now, Marcus shouted, releasing the grappling clamps. The Wandering Star shot away from the asteroid like a projectile fired from a cannon, traveling at tremendous speed directly toward the gap between the two interceptors. The sudden acceleration pressed both Marcus and Lyra back into their seats as the ship's inertial dampeners struggled to compensate. What in the seven hells? Korath's voice exploded from the speakers. The interceptors reacted instantly, bringing their weapons to bear on the speeding freighter. But Marcus had calculated the trajectory perfectly. By the time they could target the Wandering Star, it was already past them and accelerating toward the edge of the asteroid field. Warning shots across our bow, Marcus reported as energy blasts streaked past the ship. They still want us alive. But the interceptors were built for pursuit, not for catching ships that had already passed them. By the time they completed their turn and began pursuit, the Wandering Star had a significant head start. They're faster than us, Lyra observed, watching the pursuit ships gaining ground on the sensor display. True, Marcus agreed. But I'm not done improvising yet. He activated the ship's emergency beacon, a powerful transmitter designed to attract rescue ships in case of catastrophic failure. But instead of broadcasting a distress signal, Marcus transmitted something else entirely. Attention all vessels in the Kepler Nebulous sector. Marcus's voice went out on all emergency frequencies. This is Captain Marcus Chun, requesting immediate assistance. I am transporting Empress Lyralii of Zephyros Prime, who is fleeing assassination attempts by rogue elements within her own government. Any vessels capable of rendering aid, please respond. Lyra stared at Marcus in amazement. You're asking for help from complete strangers? Sometimes the cavalry arrives from the most unexpected directions, Marcus replied. For several tense minutes, there was no response to the emergency broadcast. The interceptors continued gaining ground, now close enough to attempt precision shots at the Wandering Star's engines. Then, the communications system crackled to life, not with one voice, but with dozens. Freighter Wandering Star, this is Captain Rodriguez of the cargo vessel Santiago. I'm changing course to assist. Asterisk Wandering Star, asterisk. This is the mining ship prospector's dream. We're en route to your position. Captain Chun, this is the passenger liner Stellar Princess. We may not be armed, but we're broadcasting your message to every ship in the sector. Within minutes, Marcus's sensors showed more than 20 vessels converging on their position. Cargo haulers, mining ships, passenger liners, even a few private yachts. Every independent ship in the sector was responding to the call for help. Admiral Korath's voice came through the speakers, filled with frustration. Captain Chun, order these vessels to withdraw. This is an internal Zephyrian matter. With respect, Admiral, came a new voice. Captain Rodriguez of the Santiago, this lady asked for help, and, out here in the dark, we help each other. That's the code of space. You're interfering with official Zephyrian business. Nope, replied another voice, this one belonging to the captain of the mining ship. We're exercising our right to assist vessels in distress. And, from where we sit, it looks like you're the ones causing the distress. The tactical display now showed a small fleet of civilian vessels surrounding the Wandering Star, effectively shielding it from the interceptors. None of the civilian ships were armed, but their presence made it impossible for Korath to attack without causing massive casualties among neutral vessels. This is intolerable, Korath raged. You will all face consequences for this interference. Admiral, Marcus said calmly, I suggest you withdraw. You're outnumbered, outmaneuvered, and frankly, you're starting to look like the bad guys here. For several long moments, there was silence on the communication channels. Then Korath's voice returned cold and controlled. This is not over, Captain Chun. The Empress cannot run forever. Maybe not, Marcus replied. But she doesn't have to run alone. The two interceptors pulled back, disappearing into the nebula as the civilian fleet maintained protective formation around the Wandering Star. Captain Rodriguez's voice came through the speakers, warm and friendly. Captain Chun, we'll escort you to the Centauri trade station. From there, the Empress can arrange her own transportation. Thank you, Captain Rodriguez. I owe you all more than I can repay. No debt between spacefarers, Rodriguez replied. We all signed up for the same risks when we chose this life. As the impromptu convoy began its journey toward the trade routes, Lyra looked at Marcus with something approaching awe. How did you know they would come? She asked. I didn't, Marcus admitted. But humans have a saying. In space, no one can hear you scream, but they can hear you call for help. People out here, we look out for each other because nobody else will. Even for strangers? Especially for strangers. Today it's your emergency. Tomorrow it might be theirs. Lyra was quiet for several minutes, watching the protective formation of civilian ships surrounding them. I've misjudged your species, she said finally. How so? I thought humans were primitive, barely civilized refugees clinging to the edges of galactic society. But what I witnessed today, that wasn't primitive. That was something much more sophisticated than anything my own people would have done. Marcus raised an eyebrow, hiding behind asteroids and calling for help. No, Lyra said seriously, believing that strangers would risk themselves to help someone they'd never met. Having that faith in the basic decency of others. That's not primitive, Marcus. That's something my empire could learn from. Marcus was quiet for a moment, considering her words. Maybe, he said finally, but right now, let's focus on getting you somewhere safe. You still have evidence to present to the Galactic Council. Yes, Lyra agreed. But after what I've seen today, I think I have more to tell them than just evidence of corruption in my government. What do you mean? Lyra smiled, looking out at the convoy of civilian ships that had risked themselves to protect a stranger. I think I need to tell them about humanity. Centauri Station hung in space like a massive steel flower, its multiple docking arms extending in all directions to accommodate the constant flow of interstellar traffic. The station served as one of the galaxy's major trade hubs, a neutral ground where representatives from dozens of civilizations conducted business far from the political pressures of their homeworlds. Marcus guided the wandering star through the approach corridors, following the automated traffic control signals toward docking Bay 73. Behind them, the civilian convoy that had escorted them through the nebula began dispersing to their own destinations, their captains exchanging final messages of farewell and good fortune. I've never seen anything like that, Lyra said, watching the last of their protectors disappear into the station's maze of docking bays. Complete strangers risking themselves for someone they'd never met. The code of space, Marcus replied, repeating Captain Rodriguez's words. Out here, we're all just trying to make it through another day. Helping each other is how we survive. The wandering star settled into its assigned berth with a gentle thud as the docking clamps engaged. Marcus began the shutdown sequence while Lyra gathered her few possessions, mostly clothing Marcus had provided during their journey. What will you do now? Marcus asked as they prepared to disembark. I'll contact my allies within the Galactic Council, Lyra replied. Present the evidence I've gathered about the corruption in my government. Try to prevent the war that Admiral Korath and his faction want to start. Marcus nodded, though something in her tone suggested uncertainty. That sounds like a plan. What's troubling you? Lyra paused in her packing, considering her words carefully. A week ago, I thought I understood the galaxy. I knew which species were advanced, which were primitive, which could be trusted with important responsibilities. But you've challenged all of those assumptions. How so? The Galactic Council considers humans to be refugees, survivors of a dead world, who contribute nothing significant to interstellar civilization. You're seen as scavengers, cargo haulers, maintenance workers, the kinds of jobs that require physical labor, but not intellectual sophistication. Marcus winced slightly. That's not entirely inaccurate. Most humans do end up in service jobs. But it is inaccurate, Lyra insisted. What you did in that asteroid field, the tactical thinking, the improvisation, the sheer audacity of it, that wasn't the work of a primitive mind. And the way you called for help, knowing that others would respond. She shook her head. My own military commanders wouldn't have thought of either strategy. Maybe they just haven't been desperate enough yet. No, it's more than that. Marcus, in the 3 days I've known you, you've shown me more genuine kindness and strategic brilliance than I've encountered in years of dealing with galactic leaders. And you're supposedly a refugee from a primitive species. Marcus finished the shutdown sequence and turned to face his passenger, though he supposed she wasn't really his passenger anymore. Soon, they would part ways, and she would return to her world of galactic politics while he continued his solitary existence hauling cargo through the void. Maybe the galaxy's classifications are wrong, he said simply. I think they are, and I think that's a problem I need to address. They made their way through the station's corridors, passing representatives from dozens of species conducting business in the neutral environment. Centauri Station was famous for its diversity, one of the few places in the galaxy where a human could walk openly without attracting unwanted attention. Lyra had arranged to meet her contact in one of the station's private conference rooms. As they walked, Marcus noticed that she moved differently now, with the bearing and confidence of someone accustomed to command. The injured refugee he'd rescued was gone, replaced by the Empress she'd always been. This is where we part ways, Lyra said as they reached the conference room. Marcus, I don't know how to thank you for what you've done. No thanks necessary, Marcus replied. You would have done the same for me. Would I? Lyra asked seriously. A week ago, if I had encountered a human freighter in distress, would I have stopped to help? Or would I have assumed it was someone else's problem? Marcus didn't answer, but they both knew the truth. I need to ask you something, Lyra continued. After I present my evidence to the council, after I deal with the corruption in my government, would you consider coming to Zephyros Prime as my guest? Marcus raised an eyebrow. I'm not exactly diplomatic material. You're exactly diplomatic material. Marcus, you've shown me that humans have qualities the galaxy desperately needs. Adaptability, creativity, the ability to inspire cooperation among strangers. My empire could benefit from that perspective. Before Marcus could respond, the conference room door opened and a tall, elegant figure emerged. The being was clearly Zephyrian, the same pale blue skin and silver hair as Lyra, but older, with an air of authority that spoke of high rank. Empress, the figure said formally, bowing deeply. I am relieved to see you safe. Ambassador Theron, Lyra replied warmly. Thank you for arranging this meeting on such short notice. Ambassador Theron's eyes fell on Marcus, and his expression became carefully neutral. And this is the human who saved my life, Lyra said firmly. Captain Marcus Chun, I'd like you to meet Ambassador Theron, my representative to the Galactic Council. Theron's surprise was obvious. A human? Empress, surely you could have found more suitable assistants. The comment hung in the air like a challenge. Marcus had heard similar dismissive remarks countless times throughout his years in space, but somehow this one stung more than usual. Perhaps because he'd spent the last few days being treated as an equal by someone who was arguably the most powerful person in the galaxy. Actually, Lyra said coolly, Captain Chun proved far more suitable than the supposedly sophisticated military officers who were supposed to protect me. He not only saved my life, but also devised a strategy that allowed us to escape pursuit by 2 Zephyrian interceptors. Theron looked skeptical. Surely you exaggerate, Empress. I do not. Marcus, would you mind explaining to the ambassador how we escaped Admiral Korath's ships? Marcus glanced between Lyra and Theron, sensing undercurrents he didn't fully understand. It was fairly straightforward, he said modestly. I used the asteroid field's gravitational dynamics to build momentum, then called for assistance from civilian vessels in the area. You used gravitational dynamics, Theron repeated slowly. And civilian vessels responded to your call for help? 23 ships, Lyra confirmed. They formed a protective convoy and escorted us to safety, despite knowing they might face retaliation from Zephyrian military forces. Theron stared at Marcus with new interest. That's remarkable. Most species would never risk themselves for strangers, especially not against military vessels. Most humans would, Marcus replied. It's just how we're raised. Fascinating, Theron murmured. Empress, perhaps this meeting should be expanded to include others. What Captain Chun has accomplished might be relevant to our discussions with the Council. What do you mean? Lyra asked. The Council has been debating the human refugee situation for months, Theron explained. There's been pressure to establish formal relocation camps to better manage the human population. Some members believe humans are becoming too integrated into galactic society without proper oversight. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. Relocation camp. Nothing sinister, Theron hastened to explain. Just centralized locations where humans could be concentrated for their own protection and the galaxy's security. That sounds exactly as sinister as you think it does, Marcus said quietly. I agree, Lyra said firmly. Ambassador, I want you to arrange a formal presentation to the full Galactic Council. I have evidence of corruption within my government to present, but I also want to address this human situation. Empress, with respect, perhaps your recent ordeal has affected your judgment. Humans are refugees, survivors of a dead world. They're not equipped for significant roles in galactic civilization. And yet, Lyra said pointedly, the humans standing before you accomplished something your trained military analyst said was impossible. He outmaneuvered 2 military vessels using nothing but creativity and the willingness to ask for help. Theron was quiet for several moments, clearly struggling with concepts that challenge his worldview. Even so, one exceptional individual doesn't represent an entire species. Doesn't it? Lyra asked. Marcus, how many humans do you know personally? Maybe 50 or 60, Marcus replied. We tend to stay in touch across the shipping networks. And how many of them would have done what you did? Rescued a stranger, protected them from pursuit, called for help from other civilians. Marcus considered the question seriously. Probably all of them. That's just what you do. Lyra turned to the Rin triumphantly. You see, what we witnessed wasn't exceptional human behavior. It was typical human behavior. They're not primitive refugees, Ambassador. They're a species with qualities the galaxy desperately needs. The conference room fell silent as the Rin processed this information. Through the viewports, the bustling activity of Centauri Station continued. Hundreds of different species conducting business, building relationships, creating the complex web of cooperation that held galactic civilization together. If what you're saying is true, the Rin said slowly, then the Council has seriously misjudged the human situation, which is exactly why I need to address them directly, Lyra replied. Marcus, I'm asking again. Will you come with me to address the Galactic Council? Will you help me show them what humanity really represents? Marcus looked out at the station, thinking about all the humans scattered across the galaxy, working thankless jobs, keeping their heads down, trying not to attract attention while slowly being forgotten by history. If the Council was considering relocation camps, things were worse than he'd realized. If I do this, Marcus said carefully, it won't just affect me. Every human in the galaxy could be impacted by what happens in that council chamber. I know, Lyra said softly. I'm asking you to speak for your entire species. No pressure, Marcus muttered, then sighed. All right, I'll do it, but I want something in return. Name it. I want to contact other humans before we go to the council. If I'm going to represent humanity, I should at least talk to some humans first. Of course. Ambassador, can you arrange for Captain Chun to use our diplomatic communication array? The Rin nodded, though he still looked uncertain about the entire situation. It could be arranged. Empress, are you certain about this course of action? More certain than I've been about anything in years, Lyra replied. The galaxy is about to learn something important about humanity, Ambassador. I suggest we all prepare ourselves for that revelation. As they left the conference room and headed deeper into the station's diplomatic quarter, Marcus found himself wondering what he'd gotten himself into. A week ago, he'd been a simple cargo hauler drifting through the nebula. Now, he was apparently about to address the most powerful governing body in the galaxy. But as he thought about all the humans he'd known over the years, good people doing difficult jobs with dignity and grace, helping each other survive in a universe that had little use for them, Marcus realized that someone needed to speak for them. Someone needed to remind the galaxy that humanity was still here, still contributing, still worth something more than pity or neglect. If that someone had to be him, then so be it. Marcus, Lyra said as they walked, there's something else you should know about the council session. What's that? Admiral Korath will be there. He's planning to present his own version of recent events, painting me as mentally unstable and you as a human criminal who kidnapped me for ransom. Marcus nodded grimly. Of course he is. Well, I guess we'll just have to tell a better story than he does. Indeed we will, Lyra agreed. The question is, will the council be willing to listen? As they entered the Diplomatic Communications Center, Marcus began composing the most important message he'd ever sent, a call to every human in the galaxy, asking them to trust him with their future. Because in 3 days, in front of the most powerful beings in the galaxy, he would either prove that humanity deserved a place among the stars, or he would watch his species disappear into the footnotes of history. Either way, the age of hiding was about to end. The Galactic Council Chamber was a marvel of engineering and diplomacy, a massive spherical structure that could accommodate representatives from hundreds of different species in environments suited to their particular needs. Atmospheric sections could be adjusted for different gas mixtures, gravity fields could be modified for various physiologies, and translation systems ensured that every word spoken could be understood by every delegate present. Marcus Chun had never imagined he would stand in this place. 3 days earlier, he'd been a simple cargo hauler, making routine runs through the outer systems. Now, he floated in the human observation section, wearing formal clothes that Ambassador Therin had somehow procured, preparing to address the most powerful governing body in the galaxy. Beside him, Empress Lyralii of Zephyros Prime reviewed her notes one final time. She wore the formal regalia of her office, flowing robes of deep blue that seemed to capture starlight, with a crystalline crown of her house resting on her silver hair. The transformation from the injured passenger he'd rescued to the regal figure beside him was remarkable, yet somehow she was still the same person who'd helped him clean dishes in his ship's galley. "Are you ready for this?" Lyra asked quietly, her voice carrying through their private communication link. "No, Marcus Viplaidanisti. But I suppose that's never stopped humans before." In the 3 days since their arrival at Centauri Station, word of the upcoming session had spread throughout human communities across the galaxy. Marcus had received messages from cargo haulers, mechanics, miners, and maintenance workers, people expressing everything from hope to terror at the prospect of humanity stepping into the galactic spotlight. The most touching message had come from Sarah Martinez, a human engineer working on a terraforming project in the Vega system. "Marcus, I've been hiding what I am for 10 years, pretending to be from a lost colony world, so I could work alongside alien colleagues. If you can change that, if you can make it so we don't have to lie about who we are anymore, then you speak for all of us." The chamber filled slowly as representatives from member civilizations took their places. Marcus recognized some of the species from his years in space. The graceful Andromedans with their crystalline skin, the massive Centaurians who required reinforced seating, the insectoid hive mind collective that spoke in perfect unison. Each civilization represented millions or billions of souls, entire worlds, and systems bound together by the Council's authority. At the center of the chamber floated the Speaker's platform, where Council Chancellor Vexhai of the Rigel Consortium would preside over the session. Chancellor Vexhai was an ancient being, nearly 2 meters tall with pale yellow skin and large, multifaceted eyes that could perceive across several spectrums simultaneously. He'd held the position for over 50 standard years and was known for his fair but decisive leadership. The 847th session of the Galactic Council will now commence, Chancellor Vexhai announced, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's translation systems. "We gather today to hear testimony regarding recent events in Zephyrian space and to address the ongoing question of human population management." Admiral Korath was the first to take the speaker's platform. The Zephyrian military officer looked imposing in his formal uniform, decorated with ribbons and insignia that spoke of a distinguished career. He spoke with the confidence of someone accustomed to command. "Honorable delegates," Korath began, "I come before you today with a heavy heart. Our beloved Empress Lyralii has been the victim of a criminal conspiracy involving human elements operating in the outer systems." He activated a holographic display showing the rescue scenario, but his version painted Marcus as an opportunistic criminal who had staged the entire incident. This human, operating under the false identity of Marcus Chun, orchestrated an attack on the Empress's vessel and then appeared to rescue her, gaining her trust in order to hold her for ransom. When Zephyrian forces attempted to recover our sovereign, this criminal used terrorist tactics and endangered civilian vessels to escape justice. Marcus felt his jaw clench as Korath twisted the truth, making heroic action sound sinister and self-defense appear criminal. Furthermore, Korath continued, "This incident demonstrates the danger of allowing humans to operate freely throughout galactic space. They are desperate refugees with nothing to lose, willing to resort to any means to improve their circumstances. The human population must be contained and monitored before more such incidents occur." Several delegates nodded approval, and Marcus felt his heart sink. Korath was a skilled speaker, and his version of events sounded plausible to beings who had no context for human behavior. "I therefore recommend," Korath concluded, "that the Council immediately implement the Consolidated Human Settlement Protocol, gathering all human refugees into managed communities where they can be properly supervised and contained." The chamber buzzed with discussion as Korath returned to his seat. Marcus could see delegates from various species conferring among themselves, many seeming to agree with the Admiral's assessment. Chancellor Vexhai called for order. The council recognizes Empress Lyralii of Zephyros Prime. Lyra rose gracefully and moved to the speaker's platform. Even in this assembly of galactic leaders, her presence commanded attention. She activated her own holographic display, showing detailed recordings from her ship systems. Honorable delegates, Lyra began, her voice clear and strong. Admiral Korath's account is not merely inaccurate. It is a deliberate fabrication designed to cover his own criminal actions. The chamber fell silent as Lyra presented evidence of the corruption within her government. Recorded conversations, financial transactions, and strategic plans that revealed a conspiracy to start wars for territorial expansion. Admiral Korath and his faction arranged the attack on my vessel when I attempted to expose their warmongering. I was dying in space when Captain Marcus Chun, a human cargo hauler, responded to my distress call and saved my life, asking for nothing in return. She showed sensor records from the Wandering Star, proving that Marcus had indeed been conducting routine cargo operations when he detected her ship. But, more importantly, Lyra continued, the subsequent events revealed something significant about human nature that this council needs to understand. The holographic display showed the asteroid field encounter, including Marcus's innovative use of gravitational dynamics to escape pursuit. But the most powerful moment came when the recording showed the response to Marcus's call for help. Ship after ship volunteering to assist complete strangers against military vessels. 23 civilian vessels, Lyra said, her voice filled with emotion, responded without hesitation to help someone they'd never met. They risked retaliation from military forces to protect a stranger because their human captain believed it was the right thing to do. The chamber was completely silent now, delegates listening intently. For too long, this council has viewed humans as primitive refugees, survivors to be pitted and managed. But Captain Shin showed me something different. He showed me a species with qualities that the galaxy desperately needs: adaptability in crisis, creativity under pressure, and above all, the instinctive willingness to help others without expectation of reward. Lyra gestured toward Marcus. I ask you to hear from Captain Shin directly. Let him speak for his people, and then decide whether humanity should be contained or embraced. Chancellor Vexhai note that formally. The council recognizes Captain Marcus Chun of Earth. Marcus felt every eye in the chamber turned toward him as he rose and walked to the speaker's platform. His legs felt unsteady and his mouth was dry, but he forced himself to stand straight and speak clearly. Honorable delegates, Marcus began, a week ago, I was nobody special, just a cargo hauler trying to make an honest living in space. I'm not a diplomat or a leader or anyone important. I'm just human. He paused, looking around the chamber at the assembled representatives of galactic civilization. The Empress is right. Humans are refugees. Earth is gone, and we're scattered across the galaxy trying to rebuild our lives. Most of us work jobs that nobody else wants in dangerous places for little pay. We keep our heads down and try not to cause trouble. Some delegates nodded, confirming their perception of humans as marginalized survivors. But here's what I think you don't understand about us. Marcus continued, his voice growing stronger. Being refugees didn't make us weak, it made us resourceful. Losing our home world didn't make us primitive, it taught us to adapt. Having nothing left to lose didn't make us dangerous. It made us willing to take risks to help others. He activated his own holographic display, showing images he'd compiled over the past 3 days. While we've been talking here, I've been in contact with humans across the galaxy. Dr. Sarah Martinez, who's been designing atmosphere processors on Vega 7 for 10 years. Her supervisors don't even know she's human. Chief Engineer Tom Wilson, who prevented a reactor meltdown on Rigel Station last month, saving 12,000 lives. Captain Rosa Santos, who's been running medical supplies to quarantine zones in the Outer Rim. The images showed human after human making contributions to galactic society, not as primitive refugees, but as skilled professionals, innovators, and heroes. "We're already integrated into your civilization," Marcus said. "We're already contributing. We're already here. The only question is whether you're going to acknowledge that or pretend we're still the helpless refugees you want us to be." He looked directly at Admiral Korath. "The Admiral calls us dangerous because we helped each other escape his illegal pursuit. But isn't mutual aid exactly what civilization should encourage? Isn't cooperation across species lines what this council stands for?" Marcus turned back to the assembled delegates. "You're debating whether to put us in camps for the galaxy's protection. But I ask you, protection from what? From people who will risk their lives to save strangers? From people who call for help when they're in trouble and actually get answers? From people who adapt and survive and never give up?" The chamber was completely silent, delegates listening intently to his words. "Earth is gone," Marcus said quietly. "We can't go home. But we found something else out here among the stars. We've found that home isn't a place. It's the people you choose to stand with when things get dangerous. It's the strangers who answer your distress calls. It's the willingness to help someone you've never met because it's the right thing to do." He gestured toward the assembled representatives. "You are the leaders of the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. You've built this amazing institution to solve problems and maintain peace across thousands of worlds. But somehow, you're afraid of 100,000 refugees who've proven they'll risk everything to help each other." Marcus took a deep breath, preparing for his conclusion. "Don't put us in camps. Don't manage us, or contain us, or treat us like problems to be solved. We're not asking for charity or special treatment. We're asking for the same thing every species in this chamber already has: the right to contribute, to build, to be part of something larger than ourselves." He looked around the chamber one final time. "Humans have been part of galactic civilization for decades. We've just been doing it quietly, modestly, without asking for recognition. But we're here, and we're staying, and we're going to keep helping each other and anyone else who needs it. The only question is whether you want to work with us or against us." Marcus returned to his seat amid complete silence. For several long moments, nobody spoke or moved. Then, Chancellor Vexhai rose slowly from his position at the center of the chamber. "This session will recess for deliberation," the Chancellor announced. "The Council will reconvene in 2 hours to render its decision." As delegates began filing out of the chamber, Marcus felt Lyra's hand touch his arm. "That was perfect," she said softly. "Whatever happens now, you've given humanity a voice." "I hope it was enough," Marcus replied, watching the delegates discuss his words in small groups. 2 hours later, the chamber reconvened. Chancellor Vexhai took his position and called for order. "The Galactic Council has reached its decision," he announced. "Regarding the charges against Captain Marcus Chun, the evidence clearly shows that he acted lawfully and heroically in assisting Empress Lyralii and defending against a legal pursuit. All charges are dismissed." A wave of relief washed through the chamber, but Marcus knew the real decision was yet to come. Regarding the human population question, Chancellor Vexhai continued, "The Council rejects the proposed Consolidated Human Settlement Protocol. Furthermore, we formally recognize the human diaspora as full members of galactic civilization, with all rights and responsibilities thereof." The chamber erupted in discussion, some delegates cheering while others voiced concern. However, the Chancellor continued, calling for order. "We also established the Human Integration Initiative, designed to facilitate greater participation by humans in galactic institutions, including representation in this council." Marcus felt his heart racing. They not only avoided the camps, they'd achieved something he'd never dared hope for. "Captain Chun," Chancellor Vexhai said, looking directly at him, "will you accept appointment as humanity's first representative to the Galactic Council?" The question hit Marcus like a physical blow. Him, a cargo hauler, representing humanity in the galaxy's most powerful institution? Chancellor, I'm honored, but I'm not qualified for such a position." On the contrary, the Chancellor replied, you've proven yourself remarkably qualified. You've demonstrated the human qualities that this council